Picture this. You're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Your factory produced steel yesterday. It can produce steel tomorrow. But today? Today, you're sitting in the dark. Not because you ran out of customers, not because your machines broke down, but because flipping the switch would literally bankrupt you. Welcome to the greatest economic self-destruction in modern history. We're talking about a mistake so catastrophic, so mind-bendingly stupid that it makes the 2008 financial crisis look like a rounding error. A mistake that cost over $2 trillion. A mistake that destroyed the most powerful manufacturing economy on Earth. And here's the part that'll blow your mind. They're still doubling down. Today, I'm going to show you how good intentions, political cowardice, and scientific illiteracy created an economic apocalypse. We're going to follow the money, expose the lies, and reveal why what's happening right now will reshape the entire global economy. And if you think this doesn't affect you, wait until you see Section 5, because what started in Europe is coming to your neighborhood next. Hit that subscribe button, because this is about to get wild. What if I told you a physicist destroyed physics? Let's rewind to 2011. Facebook is still new. People are planking. And in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel, a woman with a PhD in quantum chemistry, a literal physicist, is about to make the most anti-scientific decision of the 21st century. March 11, 2011, Japan. The Earth doesn't just shake, it convulses. A 9.0 magnitude earthquake triggers a tsunami that slams into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. It's a tragedy, it's a disaster, but here's what it's not. It's not happening in Germany. It's happening 5,400 miles away, in a seismically active zone, with a 40-year-old reactor design near an ocean prone to tsunamis. Germany, for the record, has had exactly 0 major earthquakes in recorded history. Germany has had 0 tsunamis. Germany's nuclear plants were among the safest on planet Earth. But logic doesn't matter when fear takes the wheel. The anti-nuclear movement, fueled by the Green Party, Die Grünen, smelled blood in the water. They'd been waiting for this moment since Chernobyl. This was their chance. And Merkel, the scientist? She folded like a cheap lawn chair. 3 days after Fukushima, she announces the Atomausstieg, the nuclear phase-out. Not in 20 years, not gradually. 8 reactors shut down immediately. The rest, dead by 2022. Let me put this in perspective. Imagine you live in a house with a perfectly good furnace. You decide you want solar panels. Great. But instead of installing the panels first, you take a sledgehammer to your furnace in the middle of January and say, "Don't worry, I'm sure the sun will come out." That's what Germany did. They took 17 paid-off, zero-carbon, 24/7 reliable nuclear plants worth hundreds of billions and threw them in the dumpster. These plants were producing 25% of Germany's electricity. Clean, cheap, reliable. Gone overnight. Here's the kicker that nobody talks about. Building renewable energy is expensive, sure. But building renewable energy to replace working nuclear plants? That's not innovation. That's running on a treadmill made of cash while your house burns down. Between 2011 and 2023, Germany spent over $580 billion on renewable energy subsidies through the EEG, Renewable Energy Sources Act. Every single German household paid a surcharge on every kilowatt hour to fund this transition. The result? German electricity prices became the highest in the developed world, 3 times higher than the United States, double France's prices. But wait, it gets so much worse, because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, which happens constantly in Northern Europe, they couldn't just turn the nuclear back on. So what did they do? Stay with me. Section 2 is where this train completely derails. What burns dirtier than coal? The irony of German climate policy. Here's a fun fact that'll make your brain hurt. Despite spending over $500 billion on wind and solar, Germany's carbon emissions barely budged for an entire decade. From 2011 to 2021, the needle barely moved. How is that possible? Because they were burning lignite coal. Not just any coal. Lignite is the nastiest, dirtiest, most polluting fossil fuel on the entire planet. It's literally just compressed dirt that happens to burn. Let me paint you a picture. It's January. It's 5 p.m. The sun set 2 hours ago. The wind isn't blowing, what Germans poetically call Dunkelflaut, or dark doldrums. Your wind turbines are sitting still. Your solar panels are producing zero. Your factories need power. Your hospitals need power. Your grandmas need heat. What do? You burn coal. Lots of it. The very thing you claimed you were trying to eliminate. In 2022, coal accounted for 34% of Germany's electricity generation. That's higher than it was in 2010, before the nuclear phase-out. They dismantled the cleanest form of baseload power on Earth to rely on the dirtiest. And here's where it gets truly absurd. Right now, today, in 2025, Germany is literally tearing down wind turbines to expand coal mines. I'm not making this up. The village of Lützerath was demolished. People were evicted, all to dig up more of that sweet, dirty lignite coal. Meanwhile, perfectly good wind turbines were dismantled to make room for the pit. Greta Thunberg actually showed up to protest this. Greta Thunberg was protesting against the Green Party's policy. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a wind turbine blade. Let's compare Germany to its neighbor, France. France generates 70% of its electricity from nuclear. Their carbon intensity? About 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Germany? Even on a good day with lots of sun and wind, 300 to 400 grams. That means when a German buys a Tesla to save the planet, they're charging it with electricity that's 6 to 8 times dirtier than what a French person uses. The so-called green energy leader of Europe is actually one of the continent's biggest polluters. But destroying your own power grid is only the beginning of this catastrophe, because Germany had a backup plan, a secret ace up their sleeve that would keep the lights on while they figured out the whole renewable thing. There was just one tiny problem with that plan. The backup plan was controlled by Vladimir Putin. Quote, "What happens when you build your economy on a pipeline that runs through your enemy's backyard?" End quote. Let me introduce you to the most catastrophic geopolitical miscalculation since Neville Chamberlain said Hitler seemed like a reasonable guy. Germany had a plan. Kill nuclear? Check. Can't rely on renewables 24/7? Check. Need a bridge fuel that's cleaner than coal? Natural gas. Perfect. There's just one problem. Germany doesn't have much natural gas of its own. Enter Vladimir Putin, stage left, smiling. For decades, Germany operated under a policy called Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. The logic went like this. If we buy enough gas from Russia, if we intertwine our economies, Russia will become a nice liberal democracy. They won't invade their neighbors because we're their best customer. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Germany built Nord Stream 1, a massive pipeline under the Baltic Sea pumping cheap Siberian gas directly into German industry. Then they started Nord Stream 2, double or nothing, baby. By 2021, Germany was importing 55% of its natural gas from Russia. Their entire industrial base, BASF, Bayer, Volkswagen, Siemens, ran on the assumption that cheap Russian gas would flow forever. BASF's Ludwigshafen complex alone uses as much gas as the entire country of Switzerland. That's one facility. Now, here's the part that makes me want to scream. They were warned. Poland warned them. Ukraine warned them. The Baltic states were literally screaming from the rooftops, "You're handing Putin a kill switch to your economy." And then there's this moment, 2018, UN, Donald Trump steps up to the microphone and says, Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. End quote. The camera cuts to the German delegation. They're smirking, they're laughing. You can literally see them rolling their eyes like, listen to this ignorant American. He doesn't understand sophisticated European diplomacy. I want you to remember these faces. Remember this laughter. February 24th, 2022. Russian tanks roll into Ukraine. The laughter stopped real quick. Suddenly, Wandel durch Handel looked less like sophisticated diplomacy and more like suicidal negligence. When the sanctions hit, when Russia throttled the gas flows, when the Nord Stream pipelines mysteriously exploded, and yes, that's a whole other can of worms we'll save for another video, Germany was caught with its pants down in a blizzard. The price of natural gas didn't just go up, it went vertical. Spot market prices increased by 1,000% at the peak. 1,000%. Remember that factory owner from the beginning? His energy bill went from €1 million per month to €10 million per month. You can't absorb that. You can't pass that cost to customers who can just buy from China or America. You either shut down or you go bankrupt. The German government had to scramble. They bailed out utility giant Uniper for €30 billion just to prevent the entire energy grid from collapsing. They spent hundreds of billions more subsidizing energy bills for citizens to prevent riots in the streets. And here's the beautiful irony. Robert Habeck, the Green Party economic minister, the guy who spent his career protesting fossil fuels, had to go on a humiliating world tour begging Middle Eastern oil sheikhs for LNG. Liquefied natural gas, shipped from Qatar, the most expensive, carbon-intensive way to move gas on the planet. Russian pipeline gas? Cheap, already there, turn the valve. LNG from Qatar must be supercooled to negative 160 degrees Celsius, shipped 4,000 miles across the ocean on specialized tankers, then regasified. It costs 3 to 4 times as much. This is the trap snapping shut. Nuclear? Destroyed. Coal? Ideologically unacceptable. Russian gas? Enemy of the state. LNG? Insanely expensive. And that's when the unthinkable started happening. The factories, the actual factories that made Germany rich, started packing up and leaving. In Section 4, we're going to watch in real time as Made in Germany becomes Made in China. And trust me, the exodus is far worse than you think. What happens when the companies that built your country decide your country is too expensive to live in? Let me take you to Ludwigshafen, Germany. Population 170,000, home to BASF, the largest chemical producer on planet Earth. This isn't just a factory, this is a city. This facility has its own fire department, its own power plant, its own train system. It produces everything from fertilizers to plastics to the vitamin B12 in your breakfast cereal. For over 150 years, BASF was the beating heart of German industry, the pride of German engineering. In 2023, that heart started failing. BASF announced permanent downsizing in Europe, 2,600 jobs cut at the flagship plant, an entire ammonia production unit shut down forever. And where's that investment going? Zhanjiang, China. A brand new $10 billion state-of-the-art chemical complex, the biggest investment in BASF's history. Why China? In China, industrial electricity costs about 8 cents per kilowatt hour. In Germany, 32 cents per kilowatt hour, 4 times more expensive. In China, the government gives you subsidies to build. In Germany, the government lectures you about your carbon footprint. BASF CEO Martin Brudermüller didn't mince words. Europe is losing its competitive edge. We're in a situation where we have to adapt. That's CEO speak for we're getting the hell out before the ship sinks completely. And BASF isn't alone, not even close. Miele, moving washing machine production to Poland. Volkswagen, building battery factories in Canada and the US, chasing Biden's Inflation Reduction Act subsidies. Continental, moving tire production to Eastern Europe. ThyssenKrupp, discussing steel plant closures that were unthinkable 5 years ago. Covestro, seriously considering relocating entire divisions. This isn't restructuring, this isn't optimization, this is a mass exodus. Economists have a polite term for this: structural change. I have a more accurate term: deindustrialization. In 2023, Germany had zero growth. Actually, scratch that. They shrank by 0.3%. They were the only major G7 economy to shrink. 2024, barely eked out 0.2% growth. Pathetic. Energy-intensive industrial production fell by nearly 20% between 2021 and 2023. Let that sink in. 1/5 of German heavy industry just stopped. Here's what people don't understand about deindustrialization. When factories close, they don't come back. When the steel mills go cold, they stay cold. When the chemical plants move to China, they don't return in 5 years when you've figured things out. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are high-paying, union-protected, middle-class jobs that held German society together for generations. Germany's entire economic model for 70 years was simple: import cheap energy, use German engineering and precision to create high-value products, export those products globally at competitive prices, profit. Now, step 1 is broken. Cheap energy is gone. Forever. Without cheap energy, German products aren't competitive. Without competitive products, there's no export economy. Without an export economy, Germany doesn't have Google, they don't have Apple, they don't have Amazon, they don't have a massive tech sector. They have things, physical things, cars, chemicals, machines. Take away the ability to make things competitively, and what's left? A really nice museum with excellent beer and very efficient trains that now carry fewer workers to fewer factories. Here's the terrifying part. This is just the beginning. These decisions take years to fully play out. Companies don't move overnight. They finish current projects, they wait for facilities to depreciate, they slowly shift investment. The exodus happening now is based on energy prices from 2022 to 2023. Even though prices have come down from the peak, they're still double what they were before. Meanwhile, the United States has cheap shale gas, China has cheap coal and is building nuclear plants like there's no tomorrow. Southeast Asia is offering tax breaks and cheap labor. Germany is literally setting their own house on fire to prove to the world how serious they are about fire safety. And the world is watching, taking notes, and doing the exact opposite. But wait, surely the renewable energy is working well, right? Surely all those wind turbines and solar panels are at least producing reliable power. Oh, buckle up. Section 5 is where we discover the $4 billion ghost electricity scandal. Yes, you read that right. Ghost electricity.
What if I told you Germany pays wind farms billions not to produce electricity? Let's talk about the thing nobody wants to discuss. Germany has a geography problem. The wind blows in the north. The offshore wind farms in the North Sea and Baltic Sea generate massive amounts of power when the weather cooperates. The factories are in the south, Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg. That's where BMW, Audi, Siemens, and Bosch are located. To get electricity from point A to point B, you need high-voltage transmission lines, big ones. The biggest project is called SüdLink, SouthLink. It's supposed to be the main artery pumping green energy from the windy north to the industrial south. Original completion date? 2022. Current completion date? 2028. Maybe. What happened? Welcome to German bureaucracy, environmental lawsuits, and NIMBY, not in my backyard, protests. Environmentalists protested the environmental solution. Let that irony sink in. Originally, they planned overhead lines, cheaper, faster, easier to maintain, but people complained about the visual impact. so they agreed to bury the cables underground. This tripled the cost and added 6 years to the timeline. We're talking about a delay that costs over 10 billion euros and counting. So what happens today, right now, when a storm hits the North Sea? The wind turbines go into overdrive. They generate massive amounts of electricity, gigawatts of power. But the transmission lines can't handle it. The grid in the north gets overloaded. If they don't do something, the whole system will crash, causing blackouts across northern Germany. So the grid operators tell the wind farms, shut down, stop producing. But here's the absolutely insane part. The wind farms still get paid full price for electricity they didn't produce. It's called redispatch or curtailment compensation. I call it ghost electricity. In 2022 alone, Germany paid 4.2 billion euros for ghost electricity, electricity that never was generated, power that nobody used. 4.2 billion euros. You know what 4.2 billion euros could buy? 8 new nuclear reactors, or the entire SuedLink transmission line, or subsidies to keep factories from leaving. But instead, German consumers are paying wind farms to not produce power. Meanwhile, because that clean northern energy can't reach the south, what do the factories in Bavaria do? They fire up coal and gas plants, the very things you were trying to eliminate. So German consumers are paying twice. First, for the clean energy they didn't get. Second, for the dirty energy they had to use instead. And who pays for all of this? The German grandmother opening her mailbox to find an electricity bill that's doubled in 3 years. Energy poverty in Germany has skyrocketed. In 2023 alone, over 6.3 million households struggled to pay their electricity bills. Millions of people having to choose between heating and eating. This is a Rube Goldberg machine of inefficiency. Build wind turbines in the wrong place. Don't build transmission lines. Pay wind farms not to produce. Burn fossil fuels in the south anyway. Charge citizens for the entire mess. And wonder why your economy is collapsing. But what about batteries, I hear you asking? Can't we just store the excess energy? To store just 1 day of Germany's electricity consumption, you'd need batteries costing over 200 billion euros. And those batteries would need to be replaced every 10 to 15 years. The entire German federal budget is 476 billion euros per year. You'd spend half your annual budget on 1 day of battery storage. The math doesn't math. But surely the politicians learned from these mistakes, right? Surely they'd be careful about forcing more expensive changes on their citizens. Lol. Nope. In Section 6, we're diving into the heat pump rebellion that nearly toppled the government. And wait until you hear how spectacularly this backfired. What happens when you tell Grandma she needs to take out a 50,000 euro loan to stay warm? By 2023, the German government had a branding problem. They'd spent €500 billion, destroyed their nuclear fleet, relied on Russian gas, and their carbon emissions were still embarrassing. They needed a win, a visible climate victory to show the voters that all this pain had a purpose. Enter Robert Habeck and the Heizungsgesetz, the heating law. This is where good intentions meet catastrophic political malpractice. The plan seemed simple on paper. Starting in 2024, new oil and gas boilers would be banned. The replacement? Heat pumps. Now, let me be clear. Heat pumps are amazing technology. They're basically air conditioners running in reverse. They're incredibly efficient. In the right circumstances, they're 3 to 4 times more efficient than a gas boiler. Here's the problem. Germany doesn't have the right circumstances. Most German homes were built between 1950 and 1990. Thick brick walls, single-pane windows, drafty, terrible insulation. These houses were designed for oil and gas boilers with radiators. Heat pumps work best in modern, well-insulated houses with underfloor heating. In an old German house, they struggle. To make a heat pump work efficiently in a typical German home, you need complete insulation overhaul, replace all the radiators, install underfloor heating, rip up all the floors, upgrade the electrical system, new windows. Total cost? Easily 20,000 to 50,000 euros, sometimes more. The government offered subsidies, up to 40% in some cases, but that still leaves families with a massive bill. And here's where it went catastrophically wrong. The messaging was a disaster. The law was announced with minimal preparation. The public was confused. The heating industry was confused. Even local governments didn't understand the details. Rumors spread like wildfire. You're going to be fined if you don't comply. Grandma will freeze to death. The tabloid newspaper Bild, Germany's largest, ran with it. Headlines screaming, "The Heizhammer," the heating hammer. 50,000 euros to stay warm. Habeck's heating chaos. Habeck's approval ratings didn't just fall, they cratered, from 50% to 25% in a matter of weeks. And who benefited? The far-right AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. Their message was simple: we won't touch your boiler. They surged in the polls. In some Eastern German states, they became the largest party. The coalition government, Social Democrats, Greens, and Free Democrats, nearly collapsed. Emergency meetings, shouting matches, the whole thing was on the verge of falling apart. They had to water down the law massively. Deadlines pushed back, exemptions for older buildings, grandfather clauses for existing systems, reduced requirements, more subsidies. Basically, they gutted it. But the damage was done. And here's the truly ironic part. In 2023 and early 2024, sales of gas boilers surged. People panicked and bought brand new fossil fuel heating systems before the ban kicked in. They locked in fossil fuel usage for the next 20 to 30 years, the opposite of what the policy intended. Meanwhile, heat pump sales dropped in 2024. The industry had ramped up production expecting a boom. Instead, uncertainty and fear killed demand. This was a masterclass in policy failure. Announce major change without preparation, confuse the public with complex rules, ignore the economic reality of your citizens, get destroyed politically, backtrack too late, achieve the opposite of your goal. The Green Party went from kingmakers to electoral poison. In the 2024 European elections, they got destroyed. Their vote share collapsed. Here's the lesson. You cannot force a transition that costs 30,000 euros per household in a country where median household income is 40,000 euros per year. The math doesn't work, the politics doesn't work. Nothing works. So, with all this chaos, surely Germany's carbon emissions are at least dropping, right? Surely all this sacrifice achieved something. Well, yes, technically, but wait until you hear why they dropped. Section 7 is going to make you angry. What if saving the planet just meant destroying your economy? Here's the headline the German government loves to share. Germany's CO2 emissions hit a 70-year low in 2023. We're crushing our climate targets. Champagne corks popping, self-congratulatory speeches, proof that the Energiewende is working. Until you ask one simple question. Why did emissions drop? Was it because of all those wind turbines? Was it the heat pumps, the electric cars? No. It was because the factories stopped running. Energy-intensive industrial production fell by 20% between 2021 and 2023. Chemical production? Down. Steel production? Down. Paper manufacturing? Down. When you shut down factories, emissions go down. Congratulations, you saved the planet by destroying your economy. This is the equivalent of celebrating weight loss after cutting off your leg. Yes, the scale says you're lighter, you're also bleeding out on the bathroom floor. The head of Germany's Federal Audit Office, the Bundesrechnungshof, explicitly called this out. His report said, Germany is not on track for a sustainable energy transition. Germany is on track for economic contraction disguised as climate success. And here's the really embarrassing part. Germany's electricity grid is dirtier than France's, significantly dirtier. France generates 70% of its power from nuclear. Their carbon intensity is about 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Germany, even on a good day with sunshine and wind, 300 to 400 grams. On a bad day, over 500 grams. So when a German buys a Tesla to save the planet, they're charging it with electricity that's 6 to 8 times dirtier than a French person uses. The green leader of Europe is actually one of the continent's biggest polluters. Germany's per capita CO2 emissions are higher than France's, higher than Sweden's, higher than most of their neighbors. All because they refuse to admit one simple fact. Nuclear power is zero-carbon baseload energy. One nuclear plant running 24/7, 365 days at 90% plus capacity factor produces more clean energy than hundreds of wind turbines that only run 25 to 30% of the time. When you account for manufacturing, construction, and disposal, nuclear has lower life cycle emissions than solar panels and is comparable to wind. And, unlike wind and solar, nuclear doesn't care if it's nighttime, doesn't care if the wind stops, doesn't care if it's cloudy. France figured this out in the 1970s. After the oil crisis, they went all in on nuclear. Today, they have cheap electricity, clean electricity, energy independence, a thriving industrial base. Germany had the same opportunity. They had the technology, they had the expertise, they had the plants, and they threw it all away because of feelings. Now here's what's really important. The rest of the world is watching. India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Poland, Egypt, they're all planning their energy futures. And you know what they're saying? Yeah, we're not doing what Germany did. They're building coal plants, they're building nuclear, they're prioritizing reliability and affordability over ideology. China is building more nuclear plants than the rest of the world combined. They're on track for 150 nuclear reactors by 2035. India has 23 nuclear plants under construction or planned. Even Poland, coal-dependent Poland, is building its first nuclear plants. Germany wanted to be a role model for the world, and they succeeded. They became the perfect example of what not to do. Germany proved that you cannot run an industrial economy on intermittent energy alone. Destroying reliable baseload power before replacements are ready is suicide. Good intentions without physics, math, and economics leads to disaster. $580 billion spent, highest electricity prices in the world, deindustrialization, carbon emissions barely changed, political chaos. So, where does this leave us? Is there a way out? And what does this mean for your country? Let's wrap this up in the final section. If you think this doesn't affect you, wait until you see what's being planned in your country. Let's get real for a second. You might be watching this from Texas, Toronto, Tokyo, or Tasmania. You might be thinking, this is a German problem. Why should I care? Here's why you should care. Every single policy Germany implemented is being copied around the world right now. The UK is phasing out gas boilers. California is banning gas car sales. New York is mandating heat pumps. Canada has carbon taxes. Australia is closing coal plants. The same playbook, the same ideology, the same refusal to learn from Germany's mistakes. And if they follow through, you're looking at the same results: skyrocketing energy costs, industrial exodus, economic contraction, political backlash. That electricity bill you pay every month, it's about to get a lot more expensive. Now, let me be clear. I'm not anti-renewable. I'm not anti-climate action. Wind and solar have a place. They're getting cheaper. They're useful. But they cannot be the entire solution. Not yet. Maybe not ever for baseload power. If you want to transition away from fossil fuels, you need reliable baseload power. Nuclear, hydro or geothermal, massive grid upgrades, transmission infrastructure, energy storage, either batteries or other storage solutions, realistic timelines, 30 to 50 years, not 10, economic viability, it has to be affordable, political sustainability, people must be able to afford to live. Germany failed on every single one. Is there a way forward for Germany? Maybe. Maybe. Restart some nuclear plants. Technically difficult, politically harder. Massive investment in grid infrastructure. Expensive, time-consuming. Embrace natural gas as a long-term bridge. Ideologically difficult. Invest in genuine storage solutions. Hydrogen, batteries, still experimental at scale. Accept higher energy costs as permanent. Political suicide. The problem? Each solution requires admitting the Energiewende was a mistake, and politicians hate admitting mistakes. Meanwhile, France is sitting pretty. Cheap, clean, reliable nuclear power, industrial base intact, energy independence secured. They took the road Germany should have taken. And now the world is coming around. There's a nuclear renaissance happening. Bill Gates is building next-gen reactors. Small modular reactors are being developed. Even Google and Amazon are investing in nuclear for their data centers. The technology Germany abandoned in 2011 is now being recognized as essential for a clean energy future. Tech companies need reliable, clean, baseload power for AI and data centers. They're not betting on wind and solar. They're betting on nuclear. So here's my message to policymakers watching this. Learn from Germany. Please, I'm begging you. Don't let ideology trump physics. Don't let fear override reason. Don't destroy what works before the replacement is ready. Germany spent $580 billion to learn this lesson. You can learn it for free by watching what happened to them. And to everyone else watching, pay attention to energy policy in your area. When politicians promise a green transition, ask them what's the baseload plan, what's the cost, what's the timeline, what happens when the wind doesn't blow. Don't just accept slogans, demand math, demand physics, demand economics. Because energy policy isn't about feelings, it's about keeping the lights on, keeping factories running, and keeping people employed. Get it wrong, and you end up like Germany, a cautionary tale of how good intentions paved the road to economic ruin. Today, we covered the panic-driven nuclear shutdown, the Russian gas trap, the mass industrial exodus, the $4 billion ghost electricity scandal, the heat pump rebellion, and the green mirage of success by economic contraction. The lesson? You cannot defy physics with good intentions. If you found this breakdown valuable, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, share this video with anyone who cares about energy policy, and leave a comment. Do you think Germany should restart nuclear? Is it too late? Next video, why France is winning the energy war, the nuclear success story Germany should have copied. It's the perfect counterpoint to this disaster. The energy transition is necessary. Climate change is real. But the path matters. Choose the wrong path, and you end up like Germany, $580 billion poorer, economically wounded, and still burning coal. Choose the right path, and you end up like France, clean, cheap, reliable energy, and a thriving industrial economy. The choice is yours. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.